Hello, welcome to Go Vote Omaha, presented by the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha. I'm MaryLee Moulton, a League member and your host. Each program we talk about important public policy issues, and we hope you'll discuss these issues, and at election time you will be ready and willing to go vote. Our guests today are Brian Kruse, Douglas County Election Commissioner, and his deputy, Carithers. We are going to be discussing voting and elections. Thank you for joining us, Brian and Chris.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
let's just start out with how you managed to get your positions, how you became the Douglas County Election Commissioner and Deputy, and it's a little different from county to county here in Nebraska.
That's right. So my position is appointed by the governor of Nebraska. And so any county in the state of Nebraska that has more than a population of 100,000 has an election commissioner appointed by the governor.
Okay, which would be two counties?
Three.
Three counties, okay.
Douglas, Lancaster, and Sarpy.
Okay.
Counties can have election commissioners and some board of commissioners, like Hall County, for example, in Grand Island has an election commissioner, but that's appointed by their board of commissioners. But the vast majority of elections in Nebraska are run by the county clerks across the state. So essentially how Governor Ricketts did it was he asked for applications, and so I applied, and then from the applications the governor chose who he would like to interview. So I went to Lincoln for an interview with the governor, him and I, one-on-one for a 30-minute interview, and apparently I made the best impression upon him. They called me about 3 weeks later and selected me, which I was very honored and happy to get the position, and it's a great job.
And you're a Republican.
And I am Republican, yes.
Which means your deputy would be a Democrat.
That's right. The chief deputy does have to be of the opposite party. We, it's important, I think, to note that we strive to be very nonpartisan. But I always like to tell people it's probably not real hard to figure out what party I'm from since the governor appointed me. But we do strive to be nonpartisan. And when people do ask what our personal opinions are, we're always quick to point out that our personal opinions don't matter.
And were you also chosen by the governor?
No, the political parties, other than the governor's party or Brian's party in this case, submit three names. So the Republicans can submit three names, and the Libertarians can submit three names of people that they would like to have as representatives on the election commission, and then it's an interview process for that as well. And it's a 4-year term, and I was on the list and made the cut.
Great. Now, how do you work in managing the office together?
You know, Chris and I have a great working relationship together, and you know, when I got in there, we kind of talked about what we wanted to do, and we both had, I think, the same goals. We definitely have the same goals now, but we did in the beginning that we really wanted to reach out to the community. You know, the election commission, rightly or wrongly, has had some issues in the past with varying communities within Douglas County. And so we really wanted to reach out, not just to them, but to all parts of the county, from east to west, to north to south, and really let them know we're here to serve them. We're public servants, and you know, our goal is to get people to the polls, to get them educated, to help them vote, and we're there to make sure that people's votes count. That is our number one priority, is to make voting accessible to the public and to help them understand how that happens in an easy and fair and honest manner.
Well, it's probably a little more complicated than most voters think. Now, you have early voting that starts a month before the election, and there is early in-person voting at your office, and then voting on election day and provisional ballots. So everyone expects results as soon as the polls close. How does that actually work, and when do you count the ballots? Do you start on election day? Do you start before election day? How does that all work?
Sure. So I would say this, our philosophy is that we will never sacrifice speed for accuracy. It's just not something we're willing to do. So how the counting actually happens is on Monday, before Election Day, which would be Tuesday. State statute or state law allows us to count early voting ballots. So we will begin to count early voting ballots on Monday. And we will count everything on Monday that has arrived in our office essentially through Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening, through drop boxes and through the mail on Saturday and things of that nature.
And about how many ballots is that for, say, like in the last congressional election?
In the last congressional election, it was about 33%. Oh, no, I take that back, about 39% voted early. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of 77,000 ballots.
Okay.
And so the vast majority of them then are counted on Monday. Now, at the end of the day, when we're done counting, we lock the results in a vault. We don't tabulate them. They're on a disc. We don't even know what they are.
Okay.
And then we don't even begin to tabulate those results until about 7 or 7:30 on election night. And they stay in that vault.
Okay, and the polls close at 8.
And the polls close at 8. And so that's why when the polls close at 8 o'clock, there's a couple reasons that we can give voters instantaneous results at 8 o'clock exactly. We do what we call a midday pickup in Douglas County. So at 2 p.m., all the polling places take a break. And they do a little reconciliation of the number of ballots that they've handed out and the number of voters that have signed in. And then we take those ballots and bring them to our office. And so we begin to count those ballots probably around 3:30. And so the first set of results that we release at 8 p.m. are those midday results.
Okay.
And then the 8:45 results are the early voting results. And then 9:45 begins the daytime, or from 2 p.m. on, the evening results. And then we do those every hour after that as needed.
Okay.
Now, it is important to note that voters who get an early voting ballot, if they return those to a drop box on election day, and we collect those at 8 p.m. when the polls close, because that's when drop boxes close, those ballots are then, we have to verify to make sure they didn't vote in some other manner. So between checking them in and opening, those ballots are actually counted on Friday.
Okay.
So if you get an early voting ballot, it behooves you, the earlier you turn it in, the better, because that will ensure that your vote will be in that 8:45 count. And I know there's been some theories over the years that early votes don't count, we don't report them, they're only counted if it's close. That's not true at all. Actually, people who vote early are the second set of results.
Okay.
So their votes are right there in the beginning of the evening.
Okay, and then when you talk about counting these other ballots and by Friday, in a very close election like Kavanaugh-Thibodeau for the Senate race in LD6 and the DeBoer-Deaver for the OPPD, those races were very close within a couple of hundred votes. So is that where counting those votes comes into play then?
Absolutely there. And then provisional ballots, we had about 4,500 provisionals this time around, Chris, and we count those the Friday, 2 Fridays after the election. So like 10 days later, 11 days later, because we have to verify all those provisional ballots as well. We have 7 days by law to do that. But yes, both of those 2 additional counts can make a big difference. And go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say the provisional ballots allow us to accept a ballot if someone has a question or we have a question about someone's eligibility. We do everything we can to accept that ballot. In Douglas County, we're ahead of the state average at about 81.5%. So that's pretty good. And the ones who are rejected are people who weren't registered, or for the most part, are people who weren't registered or were registered in a different county, something of that nature, and weren't eligible to vote that day. But we have to verify that for every one of those ballots. And we have about half of them. Usually in a federal election, we'll have half of them in the state in Douglas County. So.
Okay. So if it turns out that you've moved and you're still within Douglas County and you have a provisional ballot, that gets counted.
Correct.
But if you had moved to, say, some Sarpy County to Douglas County, that's a situation where your provisional ballot would not be counted?
That's correct.
Okay.
It's only if you move within county. Now, part of the bright spot about that is part of the provisional ballot is you have to fill out a new voter registration form.
Okay.
So if you have moved from a different county like Sarpy or Hall or Buffalo or Wayne to Douglas County, and your provisional ballot is not counted, you will still be re-registered with your voter registration in Douglas County. So the next time an election comes up, you'll be good to go
Okay.
and be all registered to vote.
Okay, so that's one strategy for trying to keep provisional ballots on. Are there any other strategies or education that you're using, especially in, say, underserved communities, to make sure that their provisional ballots are as low as possible?
Right. So the biggest thing that when we go on the media, when we talk to groups, the World Herald, TV stations, programs like yours, we always try and encourage people to contact our office before they go out to vote. Because we can help them, walk them through if a provisional is going to work or not work, and get them to the right location. Because you also have to cast your ballot in the right location for a provisional.
Okay, and that location would be the precinct where
It
your
would be
home is?
the polling place in the precinct where the individual lives now.
Okay,
So if you lived in, say, 156th and Maple, but you moved to, say, 45th and L, and you did not re-register, you would have to vote at 45th and L where your new location is.
okay,
Because you want to vote for people who will be representing you and what you need. And so people, representatives from 45th and L are not the same representatives in many cases, you know, that are 156th and Maple.
okay. And you can't go back to 156th and Maple and vote?
You cannot. That's
Okay.
against the law.
Okay.
If you don't live there, you cannot go back there and vote.
Okay.
That's correct.
We try to
That's
get
correct.
people the correct ballot is what we call it.
Right.
There are over 340 ballots in Douglas County
And why are there so many ballots?
because the territories or jurisdictions overlap. So you might live in one school district, but the borderline for that is different than the NRD district, which is different than the state legislative district, which is different than some others. So by the time you slice and dice, you can't fit everything into nice, neat little packages.
Okay.
You have to sort of split things up, and when that happens, you have a different ballot for those people. It might only be one race. It could be, you know, from West Omaha to, or West Douglas County to East Omaha. You'll probably have very few people the same ballot. But if you move a few blocks away, you'll have a very similar, but one or two races could be different.
Okay. So with all of that and having to count the ballots at different times, different types of ballots, what happens after the election and how long does it take to certify the election? And are there any specific issues that cropped up in this last election?
Sure. So it takes about 2.5, 3 weeks to what we call certify the election. And that's one thing that we try to stress to voters is results reported on election night are always unofficial until we do our official, what we call canvass
Okay.
process, where Chris and I and the election manager, Justine, signs off on the election. But essentially what we do, to boil it down very simply, what we do is we take the books that voters sign into at the polling places, and if voters notice there's a barcode by their name, we go through and scan every individual who signed in so they can have voting credit on their record,
Okay.
and that indicates that they have voted. So if we take a book and there's 341 scans, then there should have been 341 ballots that went through the counting machine. And we can tell that. So we marry all of those up for all of our precincts. And if they don't marry up and if they're off, then that's what we're doing in that 2.5, 3 weeks, is trying to figure out what happened.
Okay.
And, you know, it's important to remember that in a gubernatorial election, it takes us about 2,000 election workers, and a presidential about 2,800, and these are volunteers or draftees, and so they only do this once every 2 years. So if we're off 5 or 6 or 7 ballots, unfortunately, sometimes ballots do get handed out wrong in the morning. Someone might catch it, an inspector might catch it, and then we get them on the right track,
Okay.
again. But it's important to remember that they are human, and they don't do this for a living, and unfortunately, mistakes do happen.
Okay. Now, Douglas County now allows for voters to place their names on an early voting request list. It's not getting an early ballot. You want to explain kind of what the request list is first?
Sure. So the state law in Nebraska requires that a voter has to request an early voting ballot
For each election?
for each election. So it's you don't have to have an excuse. Some states you have to have an excuse. Nebraska is a no excuse state. You just have to put it essentially in writing. We don't have to have a wet signature or what we call an authentic signature, an actual signature like we do on the ballot envelope or when you sign in at the book, but we do have to have your signature. So you can request a ballot by email, by fax, by taking a picture of your request with your smartphone and emailing it to us.
But it still has to be signed?
It still has to
Okay.
be signed. But what the permanent request list does is if you put your name on that list, then what happens is from the Election Commission, we will send you a green postcard each and every election. And all you simply have to do is verify that's where you still live, sign the card, and send it back in. So it's kind of a reminder that elections are coming up, but it will also have the information on there that the voter needs. So they won't have to remember, do I need my driver's license? No, I don't. Do I need my date of birth? Not really. So the information will be there for them. All they'll have to do is sign and return.
Okay. And if you have requested an early ballot, you would hope people would mail an early ballot in. They can't just decide on election day, hey, I've decided I feel like going to the polling place. That doesn't work, right?
That's right, because what happens is if you request an early ballot and then you leave it on your coffee table, you say, no, I want to go to the polling place today, and you show up at the polling place. Well, in their book, it's going to say you got an early voting ballot. So then what happens is if you don't have the ability to retrieve that early voting ballot and vote that ballot on election day and then return it to a drop box, like go home and get it and take it to a drop box, then what happens is you have to vote a provisional ballot.
Okay.
And so then that's when we have to go through the process of determining to make sure you didn't vote both of them. So if you get an early voting ballot, if you lose it, you destroy it, you want a replacement, call our office. You can do that up until 8 p.m. on election night. You can get a replacement ballot. But if you've got it in your possession, you need to vote that ballot.
Okay, and you can't just drop it off at the polling place?
That's correct.
It needs to be either mailed back to us
Okay.
or in one of the drop boxes.
In one of the drop boxes, okay.
And we have those around the county now.
Okay.
But state law says we have to receive those by 8 p.m. when polls close.
Okay.
Postmarks do not count for ballots in the state of Nebraska.
And we have people that we send out on election night that are at each of the drop boxes, and they padlock them at 8 o'clock. Like a polling place, if anyone's in line, they get to put their ballot in. But at 8 o'clock, they put the padlock in and there are no more ballots taken.
Okay. Now, you do use the mail-in ballot for, say, like a school bond issue, things like that, and Secretary Gill's task force on the future elections pointed toward expanded use of vote by mail. Now, LB 163 would permit all counties to conduct elections by mail. Do you support LB 163, and how would that impact elections in Douglas County?
You know, what LB 163 does is right now there's a cap of 10,000. Any county under 10,000 can do that. And so it eliminates the 10,000 is what it does. So any county could do that. You know, we've talked about this extensively this last fall and this spring in our office. You know, it's important to note that 60% of our voters still go to the polling place on election day. So for us to try and move Douglas County or force Douglas County to by mail elections would not be prudent at this juncture, because we do have over a majority of our folks that are still voting at the polling places.
Okay. Now, is that going to become an issue, though, with trying to replace the technology that you currently have, especially for people who are, need special types of technology in order to vote for accessibility reasons?
Right. And, the governor has put in his budget this legislative session $6 million to replace all of the voting equipment in the state of Nebraska. Now, the unicameral has to approve it, of course.
Okay.
We believe they will. We hope they will.
Is that in the general budget?
It's in, yes,
Okay.
the general budget. And so if that happens, that will be our counting equipment. Now, we do have the auto marks. And, but yes, those are going to need to be replaced for the ADA community. But also for the ADA community, we are trying to make voting by mail much more accessible.
Okay.
And they can come to our office if they're able, and we can assist them. Or they can have someone assist them as long as they use the voter's assistance oath. And have you helped or delivered ballots
I've
to
delivered,
folks, Chris?
yeah, I've taken ballots to people at the end of an election cycle where they can't get it turned around. So people who are homebound or something of that nature, we'll take the ballot out to them. We try not to do it a lot, but we will help them if at all possible. Anyone who assists someone else filling out a ballot has to write on the envelope as it returns that they did provide assistance. It's like I had a gentleman who wanted to register to vote, but he didn't have his glasses, so I had to fill out his registration form. So I put at the bottom of there's a line for it on a voter registration, as there is on the envelope for an early ballot, that I assisted the voter. So.
Now, the League has been involved in H.R. 1, the Strengthening Our Democracy Act, that includes a push for same-day registration.
Okay.
What would the implications of that be for you?
Same-day registration at this juncture creates some challenges for us because we don't have electronic poll books in the state of Nebraska, because you have to verify the address somehow. Because if you aren't able to verify the address, in theory, you could go to First United Methodist Church if you had same-day registration and register to vote there and vote, and then you could go, to another polling place, say Benson High School, and register to vote and vote. And so our rolls could become a little convoluted, and it could end up that you wouldn't have an accurate election.
But you would need to invest in technology, basically, is what you're saying, if something like that passed.
Well,
Correct.
It's
Yes, there's other components that would have to happen in order to make that.
It's largely a time element. It's like when people register online, that is not an automatic, they are not automatically registered when they hit the send button. We have to verify line by line that they are who they say they are where they say they are, and then they're registered to vote. So it's not an immediate thing. So if that were election day, that would again add a length of time to when we could count that ballot, because we would have to verify all the information.
And that's why we do have voter registration deadlines currently, which is the second Friday before the election is the drop dead deadline.
Right, to give you time.
Right, to give us time to make sure everybody's in the rolls and they're cleaned up and they're as accurate as can be.
Now, for the first time in several sessions, there is no legislative bill that talks about voter ID. Has Douglas County, what's been your experience with fraud issues, and would you suggest a need for voter ID? Because I know Secretary of State Gale, when he spoke with us, did not really see that it was a problem in Nebraska.
I would say that we have not, that we're aware of, I will say that we're aware of, we have not seen any widespread voter fraud in Douglas County. Having said that, we are an administrative office, and so we're there to carry out the laws of the state. So, on an issue like this, because we are a nonpartisan office, we try to remain neutral. We probably would leave that up to the voters or the legislatures
Okay.
to determine what the best course of action for the citizens is, whether that's through a state law or a ballot initiative, either or. And then we would abide by the law accordingly.
So speed round. We
Okay.
only have a few minutes
Oh,
left.
okay,
I'm
sorry.
just going to give you a couple topics. Hacking, has that been a problem? Like especially foreign hacking of the system?
It hasn't. We have systems in place. We have double entry verification. Nothing in the election files is online per se. Even when we get an electronic registration in, it's not immediately a registration. We go through line by line, take it from the internet and put it into our intranet where it's managed. I've run the system by people in cybersecurity, and they have told us that we're doing the best practices. The main thing is our paper ballots. We're very proud of those.
Yes.
The
Yay.
18th century
Yay, paper
technology
ballots, yes.
is really doing well for us.
Okay, space in the office. You guys are out of space in your office. What is the status of getting a new office for the Douglas County Election Commission?
Well, we've been working on that for about 2.5 years, and we've made several presentations to the Douglas County Board. It appears by all measures that they're on board with us and that they're ready to go forth. And so the vote should occur on Tuesday, the 12th of February at the board meeting. And so once that happens, we've got a space they can start working, and hopefully we'll be in there by Labor Day.
Okay, terrific. And then leading up to 2020, the Democrats and the Republicans will both this time have a primary, which is different. So
Correct.
is there anything in particular that you're gearing up for that?
You know, I think the biggest thing is we just like voters to be informed. And of course, our number one thing is service at our office, service to the voters, service to the public. Try and get them to utilize our website. Get the message out that we're there to help them. We'll educate them the best we can. But the number one thing that we always say when you go to vote, if you have a question, you think you got the wrong ballot, you think someone did something they shouldn't have, contact our office before you vote that ballot.
Okay.
We can help you if you call us before you vote, but once you put it in the ballot box,
That's it.
we can't correct it.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us, Brian and Chris, and hopefully voters now have a better understanding of the hard work that goes into running the Douglas County Election Commission. For the League of Women Voters of Greater Omaha, I'm MaryLee Moulton, reminding you to inform yourself about the issues, and at election time, go vote Omaha. Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you.
That was pretty
That was
painless.
great.
Yeah, it was fun. You guys did a